Welcome, everyone. Last week, we had an opportunity to really dig in and to talk about the context in which we're working to preserve affordable housing. We have a working overarching goal around ensuring that Nashville housing options are accessible, affordable, and available to all Nashvillians. The last week's work was really a first pass on what a framework, an action framework, will shape up to be. The piece that we did not do last week is really around interventions and policies. So today's meeting will help us really establish a context for our work as we understand what tools are currently working in the housing market and how we want to augment those tools moving forward. I'm very pleased today's meeting is going to be chock full of data and information on these interventions. We're going to take a look at LIHTC, the Barnes Fund pilot, and Section 8, both housing choice vouchers and project-based vouchers. We are joined by our colleagues, Jeremy Height, certainly, from TDHA, Ashley Barnes, Ashley Brown over the Barnes Fund. That was a conflation there, wasn't it? And we also have on board Joe Kane from MDHA, who's going to be speaking about pilot, and Norman Deep, who will be speaking about Section 8 programming. All the data has been compiled by Gregory Claxton at Planning. This is just-in-time data analysis, so we are very grateful to Greg's work on this. And he'll be sending out the slides momentarily, so you'll have them to review at your leisure. And so at this point, I am going to turn this over to Mick and Edward. But before I do, we do have some time constraints today. So the order of presentation will be, Greg will tee us off talking about, really the gap analysis, the supply gap analysis, and then heading into LIHTC Barnes Fund pilot. We'll take a break so that we can have Jeremy and Ashley and Joe Kane join us and ask them some questions, and then we'll finish up with Section 8. We want to respect Jeremy's time and Ashley's time as they have to be off right around 1 o'clock. So you'll have to work with us on this schedule, but we'll make sure we land this plane on time. And I'm going to turn this over to Edward and Mick.
Hey there, I'm not sure that Ed's joined us just yet, but I did look at our attendees and it does look like Berkeley Allen may be in the attendee realm rather than the panelist realm. That's what it appears. So I don't know if we can do anything about that to get her moved over to be a panelist. But just want to say, don't want to spend too much time here, but want to say thanks everyone for joining us, especially our esteemed guests. And we're going to learn a lot. And, the way that I think about it, and I'm sure, as Dia sort of teed it up, is that in order to figure out what we should recommend going forward, it's really important that we have a good sense of what's going on the ground today. And what we have here is sort of the city's flagship affordable housing programs / interventions going on. So this will be really good to get us started thinking about, okay, how can we amplify what's working well? How can we mitigate obstacles or challenges that these programs are facing right now? And those types of things as we move into next week and the following discussions here. So I don't want to take any more time away from our guests. I do want to give Kay a chance as our chair for this particular committee to welcome everyone as well. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Kay, but also didn't want to hand it off to our presenters just before giving you a chance to say hello.
No, hello everybody. I'm glad so many people are sticking with us and through this journey, which I look at as not a sprint, but a marathon. Important information is going to be shared today by folks on this call, a lot of good data. I want to encourage you to make notes of your questions, and even if we can't get them answered today, if you'll email them to us. We'll make sure to get them answered. And I want to direct everybody to print this out. Can you see this? This is our schedule, and it has bullet points with what we want to stay focused on. So that's my North Star as we move through this process. And if I'm missing something or we're missing something, please let us know, because we want to make sure that we get where we're going with the best outcome that we can get. So thanks everybody for joining us. I look forward to hearing from everyone, I guess, starting with Jeremy, maybe. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Oops, I'm sorry. I'm just going to jump in here, folks, real quick. If we can actually have Greg do the data first, Jeremy, and then we'll tee you up right after Greg's presentation on the data. Thank you.
Yeah. And as you're setting that up, Greg, I also want to recognize Angie, our other chair for this committee, and maybe she can help us wrap up towards the end here too. So I just want to recognize Angie as well.
Michael, can you move the the presentation ball to Greg Claxton on the list?
Thanks. And while he's passing that over, I'll get this shared. I'm going to start with updates on some material we've presented before, kind of the snapshot of where we're at with the supply gap analysis, updating that, and kind of the current inventory of income restricted or affordable units. Then I'm going to step into the and projections. And just to be clear at the outset, I'll say this a few times as we go through. This is kind of coming together very quickly week to week. So it's kind of a snapshot of where we're at. None of this is really in final form yet. Okay. We've talked about the supply gap analysis in the past. I've mentioned that planning had done a version of this to try to update it a couple of years ago. We've now done an update on based on 2019 data from the American Community Survey. I'm not going to dwell on this a whole lot right now, just to let y'all know it is coming along. We're going to try to bring it together with work we did a couple years ago and make a 2017 to 2019 comparison. But generally speaking, the gaps that we saw previously, we're continuing to identify. I want to note kind of here just some of the assumptions and simplifications that go in here. The biggest source of those are matching home values, monthly mortgage costs, monthly housing costs for owners, and kind of the assumptions of how you get from one to the other. But we've also got simplifications over household size, that kind of thing. So, this is, one snapshot where we try to synthesize all of that together to provide an overall sense of the gap at different income levels between housing units that are currently available and households that need units at those different levels. So I feel like we're making good progress, but we are continuing to work on a few different things for this. Database. There's a number of things we still need to do to sort of completely reconcile these. I think we've got duplications mostly handled, but now we need to sort of identify projects that are in the pipeline or come to us because they've been funded versus projects that are completed. Different data sources include different things, so that's one of our next steps yet. We also want to see where we have gaps in expiration dates for how long they will be affordable for, and then see what we can do to fill in what income levels they serve. We also know that there's a couple outstanding sources or potential outstanding sources. We got a list of MDHA project-based voucher locations that look like they're partly covered, but not totally covered in here. So we'll work on adding those. And then I believe there may be some housing fund properties that are deed restricted that may not show up elsewhere. So Marshall, I may reach out to you and tomorrow or Monday to see if we can fill those in. Again, it's a work in progress, but it feels like it's starting to come together. Next, an update on this projection of affordable units. This is something that we presented an earlier version of last week, just an update. We continue to have kind of units themselves broken out by MDHA units, which we anticipate staying affordable for the long term. Non-MDHA units, which we show expiring when their subsidies expire, recognizing that that may not always be the case. Some of those get renewed. What we've done here is we've also gotten a count of the number of housing choice vouchers that MDHA is authorized to provide and added that in as well. And again, we've kept that number constant for this chart right now. So this is something we try to work in concert with the snapshot of affordable units. Okay, I'm going to shift gears now and start talking about the individual programs. And this is where it's moved the fastest over the last week as we try to pull these kind of historical trends and then somewhat speculatively, very speculatively, try to anticipate what that looks like over the next 10 years. So I want to start with LIHTC, and I'm going to spend the most amount of time on this for a few different reasons. Partly it's the overarching program that the pilot and Barnes are primarily supporting, but also partly because we've got a couple different sources of things you could do a forecast based on, and I want to talk through those. Our approach generally has been to try to chart out what the historical trend is. So that's the solid line on this chart of new units added since about 2000. You can kind of see how that climbs throughout the 2000s and then maybe starts to level off a little bit or grow a little bit more slowly in the 2010s. So the first thing that we did was we took a look at recent activity, so going back to 2015, and looked at on average how many units did it seem like LIHTC was producing each year over that time, and it averaged out to 123. And so as a first attempt, and this is what we do on the other programs as well, we just sort of push that forward. So if we continue to produce, if LIHTC continues to produce 123 new units a year through 2030, that would add about 1,200 units. Now, obviously, that is a very, very simple straight line projection. We're not bringing in any sense of, is that a high number? Is that a low number? It's just sort of looking at what's happened in the past and assumes that it moves forward. The next thing that we did is
Greg.
Yeah.
Real quick, not to interrupt, but so the graph here starts in 2000, but the LIHTC program actually started in the late 80s, I believe. Maybe Jeremy can provide a count. Just I want folks to know that there was a history before that, because some of those are in fact expiring from a 15-year term.
That's right. And here, here what we've done is just focused on recent production and not shifted to and relied on this chart to look at units that are currently in existence. When do those expire? But yeah, we started with, and I forget the exact data set that this came from, but we started in 2000 or so and looked at kind of how it's been adding new units since that time. Okay, so then the other thing that we did is in one of the charts that Jeremy shared, or one of the data sets that Jeremy shared, he identified sort of matched up units that were identified in the preservation database with THDA's own monitoring of LIHTC projects. And he noted that there were about 2,500 units that were in the pipeline that had not yet been entered into the preservation database. So because 2,500 is a fair bit higher than what the projection was for the low end, that 1,200, we kind of looked at what we could do to project that forward. Or than what they would anticipate seeing, that's a higher trend than what they would anticipate seeing over the next 10 years. They think it's kind of an outsized aberration, and it's going to fall back to a lower level of production. So we kind of talked through, and what I'm showing here is a high-end production point from our conversations that looks at it. What would it look like if we added 400 new units per year through LIHTC through 2030? And so that would add 4,000 new units over that time. All of this is, again, speculative. It's sort of seeing if this happens, what would the amount may be? Does 123 sound low? Does 400 sound high? Is that aggressive? I mean, it's, you know, we're trying to give some sense of the range and what's possible.
Just quick question. In your analysis, do you look at and get an average project unit number? Because the projects typically have, that we've seen come through anyway in Nashville, Davidson County, are more than 200, you know, averaging, I don't know, 200 to 300. I wondered if you factored that number in.
That's a good question, Kay. And that's what I'm going to say applies to the rest of what I'm going to show. It is purely just looking at so for the historical trend and extending that forward, it's purely just looking at an average number of units added over a period of time and pushing it forward. It's not looking at, like, how does that align to the number of projects that are typically approved, what the size of those projects are. Now, that said, in the conversation with THDA this morning, one of the points they made is exactly what you made. Like the unit sizes that they're seeing in Davidson County are in that sort of 200 to 300 range, larger than what they see in the rest of the state. And there are, for various reasons, you know, they think that maybe a 300 to 400, you know, average per year is probably reasonable. So I took the higher end of that for a, you know, a couple different reasons, but that's not part of what I've done, but that is very much on THDA's mind when we talked about how to think about the pipeline that currently exists.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so again, you know, just to emphasize, this is a fairly simplistic analysis, but it's intended to put some sense of what the scale of future development patterns will be. There's a little bit of fuzziness around sort of the shift from what's been completed to what's been funded to what's been projected. We haven't gotten into that at all right now, other than just being aware that we've got 2,500 units in the pipeline. Okay, I'm going to shift and do the same thing now for Barnes. And I'm going to, as I go through Barnes and then Pilot, I'm going to circle back around and put all three of them on the screen together, recognizing that these are three programs that by and large work together. Okay, so talking with Ashley a little bit over the last week. Historical trend is in blue. This is what Barnes has funded so far for non-rehab projects. We haven't yet sort of sorted through what's been completed versus what's been funded. So it's going to vary a little bit from LIHTC in that way. My understanding from Ashley is that Barnes is primarily supporting LIHTC. There are some non-LIHTC projects, but they tend to be rehab, so they've already been excluded there. If you look since 2016, when it seems like Barnes sort of fully got underway at its the level of funding that it's been at the last few years, it has averaged supporting 623 new units. Again, very simplistically, rolling that forward through 2030, we get about 6,800 produced over the next 10 years. We don't have an alternate projection here, but you should absolutely be thinking of, you know, it could be substantially lower than that if conditions change. It could be somewhat higher, depending on the mix of projects, market conditions, you know, funding for LIHTC, that sort of thing. So it's a point, like it's a specific number that we've put up here, but obviously it is unlikely to be that exact number.
So this is both rental and home ownership, right?
It is rental and home ownership. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, and then shifting to pilot using a similar list of approvals from MDHA's website that we've begun working to reconcile locally as well. It's just a very similar thing, the historical trend in gray from 2016 to 2020. It seemed to be supporting about 573 units a year. Again, this is funding, is our understanding, not delivered projects yet. But if you extend that out, you're looking at about 5,700 units. Now, obviously, the question of whether it's safe to extend all of these out in the future is fair, and it's sort of the trick of forecasting. I'm not going to pretend to say one projection is right or more right, another projection is not right. But I do want to note that because we've got 3 programs that are primarily used together or in some overlapping way, they are landing in a pretty similar place between the higher forecast for LIHTC, the Barnes forecast and pilot. You're thinking about a range of 4,000 to 6,000 units through 2030, assuming no change in current programs and assuming no change in current trends. This is something that's obviously, all of this is super preliminary. This is extremely preliminary, and it's something we'll continue working to refine as we clarify kind of overlapping sources of programs and sort of the handoff from completed units to funded units. And with that, I'll hand it back to Dia, unless people have particular questions on this, so that our guests can talk through each of the different programs in more detail.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you so much for doing the analysis. I just really want to acknowledge Greg's work in this. These data are not readily available, and we really appreciate Jeremy, Ashley, and the folks at MDHA helping to clarify questions about this so that we can get a clearer picture. So this is all evolving in real time. What I'd like to do in interest of Ashley and Jeremy's time is if we could turn it over now to Jeremy to give an overview of LIHTC, and then have Ashley follow up with an overview of Barnes, and then finally bring in Joe Kane and Matt Wilshire. Welcome, Matt, from MDHA to talk a little bit about pilot, and then we can open to questions. Greg might need the presentation ball again in case Jeremy, Ashley, or Joe Kane would like to refer to data. So take it away, Jeremy.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Dia, and everybody else. This is it's a privilege to be here for you guys. And I know the low-income housing credit program is something that's unique. As Matt referenced, it was created in 1987. It's a federal program. The agency has represented and administered that program for the entirety of its existence here. A little background just for the folks that aren't as familiar with that program, because I'm not going to assume. I know there's a lot of people in here who have probably even greater depths of knowledge than I do about the program, but just to help everybody get on the same page, and you can follow along with the discussions. This helps finance private development or preserve affordable rental housing through federal tax credits to offset the construction costs. It provides a financial incentive to the person who's building that, the developer, to make affordable housing for households earning 60% or less of the area median income by offering a dollar for dollar reduction in their federal income tax liabilities to investors who buy those credits over a 10-year period. And then that's drawn from a pool that we get from the IRS every year. We also have a way to allocate those and pay them out to developers based on our state's priorities inside the program. That's called the Qualified Allocation Plan, or the QAP is what you'll often hear it referred to as. That plan's adopted by THDA's board of directors and the governor. Those priorities help us go through the competitive process because there's more requests for those tax credits than there are tax credits to award. And then the compliance period for maintaining affordability under that program is, by federal rule, 15 years. The state has, through its QAP, adopted a stronger standard. We actually extend that compliance period for 30 years. So it's a much more, first 15 is federally mandated, the next 15 is the state's mandate. And it's hard to talk about the housing credit program without including two other additional resources. The tax exempt bond authority, that's where private developers can finance construction or preservation of housing through tax exempt bond sales. Developers often use a mix of tax credits and bonds to make their developments financially viable. There's more to that, and I think Greg alluded to some of those concerns we have, because those bonds are a finite resource that the state has to use for multiple purposes. When those are awarded to the state, they're awarded to the Department of Economic and Community Development, and then they portion those out. They also can accept applications from various local governments for particular things like financing projects or public works, private activity, which can cover a broad range of activities. And then they give the remainder to us, and then we as a housing finance agency can actually hold those bonds for longer than a year. So we sometimes have a backlog that we're working on through those bond authorities. What we found in the most recent thing is we've chewed through a lot of that bond authority, because we use that for our primary function, which is private mortgages for first-time home buyers. So we have used, just for example, in the last several years, $700 million was one of our years, $600 million before that. We did $500 million last year. That chews up a lot of that, and it's something that basically funds THDA. It's our core function, so that's where we prioritize putting those bonds. We've done some things internally to address that and try to free up more room and make sure there's some available bond cap authority for multifamily development. So that's we'll get into that a little more if you want to. But the other part is the community investment tax credit, where financial institutions get a credit towards their franchise and excise taxes for making loans, investments, or grants to nonprofits or other entities for housing or capability building. Sorry. When we start talking about numbers, we could break it out. I think what I sent to everybody in the spreadsheet shows you the pipeline is. Greg showed there, there's 2,500 units that are in the pipeline. There's a 3-year on average process to go through that pipeline from awarding to the actual people occupying those units. So, and it can slip depending on a lot of different factors, but 3 years is about what we track as an average. Across the state, we've awarded $651.1 million to create or rehab 6,340 affordable rental units in the most recent year. For that, it was, let's see, for our multifamily bond, we issued $286.1 million, and that helped finance 3,036 units and an additional 52 market rate units. Going through the numbers, it's hard to read them. Community investment tax credits, that's across the state, $236.1 million in below market loans or contributions to nonprofits or public housing authorities, and that assisted them with 1,859 households getting a range of housing services or creating or preserving 470 units. Those are big programs, and of course it has to be spread across the entire state, and it is a competitive process, and that brings in a host of issues as far as forecasting as to where and how many you're going to get. Typically, Davidson County has been very highly rated and has gotten a lot of projects. We have a couple even tax credits that we're going to be awarded soon from the disaster last year. They are putting an extra, I think, $4 million in credits that's available just for the counties that were part of the tornado disaster in 2020. And that's going to be a separate round where we're going to put together applications from developers. If they don't get it in the competitive round and they're in one of those areas, they'll automatically be entered into that disaster round. We'll fund at least one project in each of those areas if possible, again, on a competitive process. And then we will go back through. If there's no more projects in one area, we'll go back and look for the next highest ranking project, regardless of which of those 5 counties I think it's located in. So there's a lot of challenges when you do forecasting. As I talked about, the bond availability is one of the biggest challenges forecasting, because we have to stay in existence as an agency, and that is our primary funding mechanism through the use of those bonds. But we have in the past several years diversified our offerings through other means with, for example, going out and getting certified to do Freddie Mac mortgages where we don't have to use our bond authority, which will hopefully over time increase the amount of bonds that we can make available so that we have a more available stream to serve the multifamily bonds. That's all I've got. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those when we're at the next stop.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to now open up the mic for Ashley Brown. So Ashley, welcome aboard and talk to us a little bit about the Barnes Fund.
Hi, everyone. I am Ashley Brown. I am the program manager for the Vouchers Fund in the mayor's office. So this is coming at a really good time for me since I've actually only been on board with the mayor's office since November. So I am still pretty new to housing in general. So this has been kind of a crash course for me. I have a background in grants management, but I still have a lot to learn as far as housing goes. That being said, this has been incredibly helpful. My participation in this group and seeing you all talk every week has been helping that process accelerate quite quickly. The Barnes Fund in general was created in 2013 and named after Reverend Bill Barnes for his work in the affordable housing community and his general community development and organizing work. And so it's mission driven around the creation and preservation of affordable housing units inside Davidson County. We do try to make that distinction because we do occasionally grant to Goodlettsville, the Goodlettsville area, and some surrounding areas of Davidson County that aren't in the urban core, as some Metro councilmen refer to it. We have, since the inception of that time, granted $44,421,688 to nonprofits in the greater Nashville area. So doing a lot of great work there. And then that's helped those nonprofits then go out and leverage $234.8 million in leverage funds. So that's from that includes their total project cost minus their Barnes contribution. So that includes things like LIHTC as well as their private loans and their capital that they match from their own organizations. I know that some folks that are on this specific subcommittee as well as the subcommittee later on tonight are actually Barnes recipients. So I'm sure you know a little bit about that process already. So I won't go into the application process too much, but essentially we get those applications. We have a team of reviewers review them. We're actually in a review round right now, which is why my time is a little constrained because we vote on awards with the Housing Commission on Tuesday. So that total award amount will actually go up after Tuesday. I'm excited for that. And then beginning in round 3, so back in 2016, we began also awarding to folks that are doing specifically rehab projects. So we've primarily funded 2 organizations that do rehab projects in the Nashville area, Rebuilding Together Nashville, as well as Westminster Home Connection. And then we also do primarily new construction as far as the developers that apply for our funds. However, there are folks that apply for land acquisition and rehabilitation of properties as well. We do also offer Metro-backed tax lots to grant in kind as part of our grant process. So if we include that amount in our total fund, that's an additional $4,191,000 in addition to the total in dollars that we've given away. So that's 84 Metro lots that we've also donated in kind to organizations over the years. And that's only about 7.5 years of work. So the fund, when it was started at a very low amount and has grown almost each year in funds. Of course, last year we had a little bit of an issue and had to readjust and make room for our budget. And then this year we're moving forward with about $7.4 million that we'll be awarding in round 8 coming up next week. So that's the general overview of what we're doing. When I came on board, it's only me running the program as well, with the commission as our oversight. So my goal in general for running this program is to find more sustainable and diversified funds to make sure that Barnes is a source of revenue for the folks that are applying for those funds on a stable level, as well as looking at all of what Barnes does from an equity standpoint. So thinking about geographical equity, where and how often are we funding different areas in the Nashville area? Where are we awarding dollars where there's most critical need, or having also awarding folks that are doing developments that have really critically needed wraparound services included in their programming, thinking about how we're promoting equity in their programs and services, as well as not only in the construction and how the bid process for that, and then thinking as well as the folks that are actually living in the units after they're built, right? Like at the end of the day, they're creating those units or preserving those units for the people that will be occupying them. So how are we best serving those constituents through not only our dollars, but the programs that we fund? And then as well, in addition to all of that, we're thinking a lot about how to better leverage the story of Barnes. I think Barnes is something that if you ask a regular Nashvilleian, a lot of people don't even know what the Barnes Fund is unless you have some background in housing or have maybe just been really interested in Metro Nashville government for a long time, or as a long-time Davidson County resident. But a lot of folks don't know that Barnes exists or how the Barnes application process works, who we serve, how we serve them. And so we're thinking a lot about how we better leverage the story, how we talk about what Barnes does and what we want to do as we hopefully grow the fund and are able to fund more innovative programs in addition to what we have been funding for a really long time, which is the creation and preservation of just units. So that's a broad overview of what I work on every day and what we are looking to do as our capacity has built with me coming on board to do that. And Hannah Davis, who is the director of housing now, who will be focusing more on policy and leveraging affordable housing from a more broad scope than just Barnes. So that's all I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you have about Barnes.
Thank you so much, Ashley. We are a little bit up against the clock, and so I'm going to invite Matt Wilshire and Joe Kane to quickly talk about pilot, and then we will open the floor to questions from members of the committee. So Joe Kane and Matt, you guys, can you tell us a little bit about pilot?
I'm just here as Joe's hype man, so I'm gonna turn it over to Joe Kane if he's on. But Joe has run this program since its inception, as the others that were previously discussed. So Joe, it's all you.
Thank you, Matt. I would like to. The pilot program has been a huge success with affordable housing here in Nashville. It started in 2015. Up until 2015, MDHA was not authorized to participate in pilots with low-income housing tax credits. And so the law changed in 2015, allowing us to create a program and initiate it for the 2016 year. And it has preserved and created to date, we have approved 4,400 units to date with that. I have a breakdown of the units between new and created. I can share with you on this, but it has grown over the years. Metro has given us the capacity to do up to $2.5 million per year. We have not. We have never exceeded that. Last year was the year we came closest, and that was due primarily to the property tax increase that was done. But even with that, we still had capacity remaining. And in last year, we approved 1,100 units, Metro Council did, for LIHTC. I want to go back to talk a little bit about Greg, when Greg was giving his analysis on there, and he was talking about what the Barnes was doing, what LIHTC's doing, and what pilots are doing. There is definitely overlap in what those things are doing. We are seeing the financials that are coming into us, and these developers are doing what has to be done in order to do affordable housing. They are layering absolutely every source of funding they can get together in order to be able to make affordable housing. And that's both true in new construction and in rehab. If I can find here's my spreadsheet. I hope you can see that. Are you capable of seeing my spreadsheet? Yes.
We can. Yep.
All right. A little summary in there. In 2000, I broke these down, and I hope you can see the color differences in there, because that's the only way I did it. In 2016, you can see we had 524 new units that were being produced. We did a total of 4 pilots, and 425 of those were rehab that took place. 2017 were all new units, 256 new units that were approved. 2018, 583 new units, 966 rehab units that came online. Most of those rehab units were one project, Trevecca Towers, 1 and 2, near Trevecca University off of Lafayette Street down in that area. That was saving the affordability in a large project there. And in 2019, it was new units, 585 units. In 2020, we did 1,100 units, also all new on what was there. The new units take time to roll into actual doors on the ground. And so they get placed in service, a couple of years later, because when we started tracking these when the pilot is essentially approved by Metro Council. So MDHA does an analysis of the application and determines if it's worthy of a pilot. Those recommendations then go to MDHA's board. The board then makes the recommendation to enter into a pilot agreement. That pilot agreement goes to Metro Council by resolution to be approved. In addition to that, obviously when it goes through the council process, it hits the Affordable Housing Committee, and it hits the Budget and Finance Committee, as well as it's going through those to review each of these pilots that come online. Going back again, I want to touch back a little about what Jeremy was talking about with THDA. We have already discussed and have essentially discussed a potential of 2,100 new units to be available in applications for 2021. Unfortunately, we know that maybe 5 of these will get approval because there's just not enough bonding capacity through THDA. But I think what this does show, from what we have talked to people about, is there is a demand for developers to build affordable housing here in Nashville because they're wanting to put together deals with this. And so a lot of these are applications that are prepared to go to THDA, but THDA doesn't have the funding. And so that's what we are looking at potentially for 2021. And then with that said, that is about all I wanted to share with you and talk about it. It's been a wonderful program. We've loved it. What it has done for affordable housing, I think, has probably been one of the single best add-ons. I will say add-ons because the pilot can't do it in and of itself. But it's probably been one of the biggest single add-ons onto that level of financing that makes the deal work. And very, very pleased to be running that for the city of Nashville.
So thank you so much for sharing that information. It was incredibly illuminating. So now we open the floor to questions. Ashley, both Ashley and Jeremy are going to have to leave us at 1. I just wanted to notify committee members about that. So if we can do this popcorn style, and I might ask Kay if you see folks. I can see Angela Hubbard has her hand up. I believe she's on a phone right now. So Angela, would you like to kick us off with questions?
Yes. To all the presenters first. Joe, this question's for you. Can you hear me okay? I'm having some internet issues today. I am on the internet, but not good video quality.
No, I hear you fine, Angie.
Okay, great. This task force, or this committee, is usually focusing, while creation's great, on preservation. And you mentioned the Trevecca Towers project. Could you talk a little bit more about that? The developer came to MDHA, or did MDHA go to that developer? Because that's a concern of ours, is the potential loss of those that significant amount of units when tax credits do expire. So how did that whole deal come together? That pilot came to help preserve that, and what did that developer do with that? Did they rehab? Did they just keep the units affordable? Could you just dive a little deeper?
I'll be glad to, and I'm going a lot off of memory on this. So, but again, our constraints are with a LIHTC, and so they were receiving a new LIHTC for that project. It was for rehab, and the units were to be rehabbed with that. As much as we would like to be able to go in and we do have the ability to put another pilot on a project or any other project that is an existing LIHTC project, if it were expiring, we don't have the funds to be able to give any other additional boost on that. So this is purely dealing with property taxes. The LIHTC also, our pilot program, cannot reduce property taxes. So this is, while I told you Metro Council is authorized up to $2.5 million, it's essentially $2.5 million of future property taxes that they would not otherwise be getting. It's because the base minimum property tax is what the property is already generating, and we generally are well above that, especially on new construction. Now on rehab, we're not usually moving well above that. So Angie, to your point, with the rehab, when we're seeing rehab pilots coming in, we're not seeing a huge difference between where the property is currently property taxed and what that tax amount would be for the pilot payment, but it does prevent them from, when they go in and do the rehab, and most of these have acquisition that are done with that. A new entity acquires that, who's then acquiring the tax credits as well. So there is a sale. Sometimes they're related entities that are buying, sometimes they're a completely third-party sale on what's going on. But there is a sale and a rehab that is taking place on these preservations. And it is when they got that new application coming in for the LIHTCs is when they come to us. So as much as we would like to go out and do that with the preservation, and we certainly are willing to do that, working with THDA and find out those numbers on those, we don't have, unfortunately, we're not that great big of a financial incentive to keep these things affordable, because it's just keeping property taxes essentially at the same level. So if there's a risk of property taxes, increased property taxes killing the deal, we can come in and help save that through a pilot. But if there's work that needs to be done and rehab that needs to get done to that, that's going to have to be kind of figured out with the developer or with new LIHTCs coming in.
Angela, I can go into that a little bit, just for everybody else's background. That deal had $62 million in multifamily bond authority, as well as $3.8 million in non-competitive low-income housing credits. Those are the 4% deals. And, you know, that was it 564 units of senior low-income housing, and it's 14% of the affordable senior housing units in the city. So once that was, we knew there was going to be something done with that property, and we started talking to that developer, to Carhagen at LHP. They've done a lot of deals with us. We worked with them very closely because we knew that that was a big loss to Nashville and hard to replace, considering most units, most even new developments don't bring in that many units at one time. So, but again, partnership, and there's a lot of those pieces that have to fit together to make that financing work.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, and I can see Kay's hand has been up, and then Lethea Mann. So Kay, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. The first question is for Jeremy on the LIHTC side of things, on the compliance side. So the compliance period when they're monitored, these projects are monitored, is 15 years. Is that right?
30.
So they're monitored over the entire 30-year period. And are there exceptions granted to projects? And if so, what are those?
There are not. If you look at that list that we have, you'll notice that some things have that 15-year compliance period. Anything new going forward has the 30 from several years ago when we made that change to the QAP. So there are things that are in the existing inventory that may opt out at the 15-year point, because that's when the federally mandated limit ends. But anything new, we at the state have actually extended that to a full 30 years.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then second question, in regards to the statewide program, I know from time to time, the board of directors and staff make decisions on allocation of the credits, urban, rural counties. And so that's a factor to consider when you're trying to make projections, but you need to look backwards to see kind of what the state, what the agency has, how the agency has performed around that issue.
Right, and one of the challenges we have right now is we actually just advertised the position for our multifamily director. So that person would be a leader in that type of development and developing that QAP and helping forecast where the pools essentially need to be. We've experimented with a couple of different ways to ensure that there's a fair allocation, knowing that we have to do it across the state, and that, you know, it's not fair to put it all in one place or one community. And there's, you know, the developers all have an opinion on what the proper counting and competitive process and what the tiebreaker should be. And so it's a tough balancing act for that director. And you're absolutely right. It is a moving target. It really makes it difficult to forecast. We've tried even doing a QAP that lasts more than a year so that we could have some consistency for people to plan going forward. But it is a challenge, and it's just a challenge.
Yeah, but you're using data from your wonderful research and planning, your research department, to inform those decisions on a statewide, county by county basis. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. There's some things in there as far as the county needs scores. We've tried several different things. I know that's been a concern of the boards. They have talked about that issue repeatedly with the multifamily developer, and so we do look at that, but they do try to figure out some way that makes it a competitive process that is a level playing field across the state, as it were.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Next question's from Lethea Mann.
Good morning. I would like to know if we could have an update on how the Section 8 voucher homeownership program is working. Is it being successful? Is it utilized at all?
Thank you, Lethea. We're going to head into the Section 8 part of this agenda in just a couple of minutes. I know that Jeremy and Ashley have to leave us at 1 p.m. So I want to be sure our colleagues, if there's anybody else who would especially like to ask questions of Jeremy or Ashley at this time, this is a great time to ask a question.
I think Eddie Latimer has his hand up.
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of things. Hey, Greg, thank you for those 2019 data. I know some people had to work overtime to do that, and it's greatly appreciated. The other thing is, I'm assuming the inventory snapshots and all these other pages are 2017 data. I don't think it's really changed that much, but I'm just curious. Is that sort of correct? Greg?
The other slides for the inventory it's a mishmash of stuff. So it's not the same vintage as the census data, which is sort of earmarked for a particular year. It'll have stuff from kind of what Barnes has approved but isn't yet built, some light tech projects that are in the pipeline, as well as stuff that's in the historical record from the preservation database, that sort of thing. So it's a mix of stuff.
It's the most recent you could get from any source. All right, thanks. That's really helpful. I got a question for Joe. Joe, of the pilot program has just been significant because of so many projects needed your layer of financing, and it's very much appreciated. Of the 4,400 units, though, since we're going to wind up ultimately being in charge of some kind of, I'm guessing, some kind of measurable outcome, of the 4,400 units that you do and that you support and that you create, how many of those would be overlapped with tax credits and bonds? About half of them?
All of them are overlapped with tax credits. All of the properties that we have are low-income housing tax credits. Selling bonds, getting bonds from a source, whether they're using, wherever they're selling the bonds, but typically those are being sold as well. So, but they are all low-income housing tax credits.
That's real helpful. Thank you.
I have a question.
Dan Lane. Yeah, Dan, you want to speak up?
For the bond fund.
Dan, I apologize. I did not hear some of your question because you broke up. Could you repeat your question for me?
What funding, and in your opinion, should that funding be? What amount?
What amount should Barnes funding be year over year to complete what we can? Is that, I'm sorry, you just broke up. Is that the question?
Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think he's asking, what's the current funding source for the Barnes Fund? And then what do you think is a good best practice option moving forward?
Great. Sorry. I think maybe I just had some technical issues. Yeah. So Dan, that's a great question. I think that for right now, the amount of money that we get per year for Barnes comes directly out of the budget for the city. So those are all municipal dollars, which is a good thing kind of for the folks that apply for our funding specifically, because it's a little bit easier to get. They're not federal reporting requirements like LIHTC and some of those other programs that we were talking about right now. We do obviously have stipulations and requirements of our nonprofits, but for some of the smaller nonprofits that don't plan to go after specifically LIHTC or Pilot or some of these other programs that are just applying for Barnes, it can be a good in between for them. That being said, I think a perfect world scenario looks something like still maintaining a large portion of the Barnes budget from municipal city dollars. So that way, technically it's still a city-owned program. We can claim that that change that is happening as a result of Barnes. But I think that there is an ability and I think what is the right word? I think that there would be growth opportunity in being able to accept more from businesses and organizations. So Barnes accepted their first outside donation from Regions Trust earlier last year, which was a $250,000 grant from Regions to then donate, which added to our grant pool this year. And I definitely envision that growing that, not specifically only from Regions, but being able to accept more awards and more grants from larger foundations to help grow the capacity of Barnes. Now, I don't know that we would ever want to be in a situation where we have more foundation dollars than we do city dollars, because then it kind of gets murky about who gets to claim that benefit. However, I do think there's an opportunity to grow the pool overall. So that way we, even if we're not giving out all of the money that we have each year, but we can maintain a steady level of funding from year to year to year. I think that I don't want to say a magical number, because as a grant program manager, the magical number is always the number that people are willing to give me. So I don't want to limit myself here in dreaming about how much money we could give out, but we do actually typically see at least a 30% over what we actually have in our funding pool than what is requested. So usually for instance, we had a $10 million request for this current funding round, but we only have $7 million available. So we're not meeting the requested amounts at this current time at the funding level that we currently have. Does that answer your question in full?
For me, contribution at that level of funding, for the bond.
I mean, you're absolutely, I would agree that there is a lot more that we could do with a lot more money. I don't get to make those decisions in a vacuum, unfortunately, or else we'd be giving away $50 million. But I definitely agree with you that we have the more money that we have, the more capacity that we have to build and create and preserve more affordable units. So I would agree with you. However, I don't get to make those decisions, but I am lobbying for them where they need to happen.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you,
John
Ashley.
Dean, John's had his hand up.
Yeah, I noticed that John has his hand up. I want to thank Ashley and Jeremy. I believe they both had to leave at 1. And if there are more questions for Ashley and Jeremy, I would encourage folks to email Kay about their questions, and we can start, being sure that we're covering questions that members of the committees have, since Kay is vice chair and over information and data. I did just want to check in with Matt Wilshire. I noticed he had his hand up. Matt, did you have a question? If not, I'd like to go to John Dean, and then I think we need to circle back on the Section 8 information.
No, Dan fundamentally got to what I was asking, which is where is their capacity if there were incremental things to push? The other question I would have for Jeremy is similarly, or maybe ask a little bit different, Jeremy, without you commenting on what's fair or unfair, because I understand you represent the state. What are the things that Davidson County could do to increase the utilization of LIHTC within Davidson County? I presume a change to the QAP would be one. If there are some other changes, what are the things, again, setting aside whether they are fair or appropriate, so that this group could be thinking about what they would advocate for? What would be the things that would increase LIHTC production in Davidson County?
Matt, I think that's a great question. I think Jeremy's dropped off the call, so we should note that as a question to continue, because I think it's a key potential recommendation from this task force is what could Nashville be doing to put those credits to good use to address the huge housing need that we find in the city? Is that
fair enough? And I would have asked Ashley the same question, but heard her answer. Ashley, how much, what is the capacity? Joe's program is essentially not the constraining entity at the moment, right? We haven't hit our capacity. Council's indicated they might be willing to expand capacity. There are not deals not getting done for lack of pilot, but presumably there are deals that are not getting done for lack of Barnes funding or for lack of LIHTC utilization. So what are those things and how much capacity could we pick up were we to expand either of those programs, I think is the question.
Good deal. I think at this point, John Dean had his hand up. I suggest Mick and Kay that we list Matt's questions for further follow-up as we move forward with committee process. So I've written down Matt's questions, but I wanted to be sure John had his question answered, and then we've got to move into the Section 8 piece.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sort of piggybacking on Matt's point, and that is I would like to see, you know, a graph or some sort of picture of what are the, you know, what are we doing in each of these areas, how they're interrelated and mutually interdependent, where are we undermining our capacity, and so the first dollars might go here, the second dollars might go there, and how many dollars should there be? I know, for example, you know, as a layman, just the Barnes Fund money is equity that then leverages low cost tax credits to fund affordable housing. So at what funding level would Barnes top out on that? I think that's really the same question Matt's answering, but I'd love to see that clearly expressed in dollars as a guide to this group in terms of, you know, where the priority should be. Thank you.
Good deal. I wrote that comment down. What I can see Eddie Latimer has his hand up as well. What I'd like to do, we're at 1:07. We have 23 minutes left. What I'd like to do is bring Greg back on to just run through the Section 8 slides, and then to open the mic to Matt and Norman Deep. So if you would all bear with us, and we can go to that. So Michael, Donald, can you pass the ball to Greg Claxton again? And Greg's got the ball, and we'll look at the Section 8 slides.
Thank you. Okay, so this one's much simpler, but the same basic idea. MDHA provided a count of kind of the maximum vouchers they're allowed to approve or allowed to provide over the past 20 or so years, and so we plotted that. We've gotten a little bit more information to refine this a little bit. But again, the historical kind of increase in that is shown in the solid line. And then for now, I've just sort of shown that topping out and staying level into the future. Doing this similar exercise as the other slides earlier would produce about maybe 40 additional vouchers per year. So, you know, things that, you know, I still need to do to refine this is pull out vouchers that are project-based, because I think those are more appropriately counted in the snapshot of specific units, and then maybe build in something that shows, in essence, how many vouchers have been used, not just how many is MDHA authorized to provide. This is based on a pretty in-depth conversation that Dia and Matt and I had earlier this week that I think is still, I think we're still refining, at least for me, I'm still refining my understanding. So that's what I have for this one. I'm interested to hear kind of the rest of the discussion with Matt and Norman.
Great. Well, this is Matt. So I lost the coin flip with Norman. So I'm going to try and give a 3-minute overview of the Section 8 program. But Norman, who runs this program incredibly effectively on behalf of MDHA, is here to set the record straight and answer any further detailed questions. But I'm going to just explain sort of in layman's terms what Section 8 is and how it plays out. So effectively, the federal government, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, makes an allocation, a dollar allocation to each region that area can use to support Section 8 housing vouchers. MDHA owns and operates units, and that is funded separately. but Norman has on his team about 40 people who administer the Section 8 program. Section 8 basically works with, we get $1 funding from HUD. We then have a list of folks who receive vouchers or qualify for vouchers, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you qualify for a voucher if you earn less than 80% of area median income. If you receive a voucher, you take that voucher to a private owner who has agreed to participate in the Section 8 program, and by participating in that program agrees to set their rents for various bedroom sizes at various levels that MDHA establishes. The recipient of the voucher, if they find a place that meets their needs, the number of bedrooms, and in the area that's close to their work or church or whatever, pays effectively 30 to 40%, and there's some calculations in this, but effectively 30% of their income in rent, and the voucher covers the balance of that. So a few important notes about this. As Greg mentioned, we have an authorized limit of number of vouchers, and the governing factor is really the dollar amount of funding that we receive from HUD. And Norman and his team are constantly having to balance that. One timely and recent example of the complication of this is the key thing about a voucher is that if your income goes down, then the value of the voucher goes up. You recertify your income. So it really is an effective tool to keep housing truly affordable for people. LIHTC is awesome, but you have to qualify by making less than a certain amount of money to live in a LIHTC housing unit. But if you, for instance, make 30% of area median income, you're still paying rent at the set level for effectively 60% of area median income. Whereas with a voucher, the amount you pay is based upon your income, and therefore you can really maintain housing affordability. But the problem with that formula is that in a time like, say, a pandemic, when many people lose their jobs and come in to recertify, a voucher that may have been worth $300, the rent's $1,000 on that unit, you earn $700 a month for your family, so the voucher covers the other $300. If all of a sudden your family income goes down, then the value of the voucher goes up, and we're not getting any more money from HUD, and so we go into shortfall. Now, Norman and his team are very effective at managing the utilization of vouchers over time and working to get additional dollars from HUD. But the program is a financially finite program based upon HUD funding. And so we have two kinds of vouchers: housing choice vouchers that an individual, we have to have many different kinds of vouchers, but the two main kinds are housing choice vouchers that an individual qualifies for, and they can take that to any unit that accepts a Section 8 voucher. The other kind is project-based vouchers, which are given to a particular project through a competitive process. And anyone who qualifies can apply for vouchers for a voucher that is attached to a particular project. Those project-based vouchers can be helpful for a variety of reasons, including the fact that they can help more units get constructed, because lenders tend to lend more favorably against project-based vouchers. So we've actually helped use the vouchers in that way to spur additional development of additional affordable housing units. But it's also helpful because we know where those units are, and there is an issue, as you might imagine, with where the private landlords who accept project-based vouchers are distributed, and whether or not folks are going into areas of concentrated poverty or going into areas of opportunity. So there's a lot of concepts in what I just addressed, but I'll stop there because I'm sure there may be some questions. But the short version is federal funding. There's a long wait list of people who would qualify, but we just don't have enough dollars for it. And Joe and his team, Norman and his team do a phenomenal job managing this program on behalf of MDHA. Actually, let me add one other thing. If you make less than 80% of area median income, you qualify for a voucher, but we do have, through a relationship with the Veterans Administration, there are certain vouchers that are restricted to veterans who are experiencing homelessness. And then in addition to that, we provide the first 18 vouchers that we hand out, new vouchers that we hand out each month, go to the Homeless Impact Division to assist individuals experiencing homelessness. And so this program really serves a broad economic spectrum of individuals, some of whom are the most vulnerable in our community, and does a really great job of flexibly working with folks based upon where their income is. Now I will pause.
I just have a really quick data question. I don't know if this is a question for you, Matt, or Norman, or maybe Greg, but the increase of vouchers since I think the late 90s, was that largely driven through the Hope 6 program? So when we lost public housing units and got vouchers for folks who were, when those public housing developments were renovated and I guess recapitalized, is that where that growth has come from? In terms of making projections for the future, this is an important part of it all. I'm guessing that's what it was, but I don't know if anyone has insight into that.
I'm looking to see if it unmutes.
I'll have a question after that, after you get your response.
Sure. The short answer is yes. It's come through a variety of means. A portion of it, and actually we can send out to the group, I think, like where that growth has specifically come from. It's in the specific spreadsheet that we sent to Greg. A piece of it is Hope 6, a piece of it is VASH vouchers, a piece of it is Shelter Plus Care vouchers, some additional vouchers that have been created, but a piece of that has been through the Hope 6 conversion process.
This is Norman again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay. My question, Matt, is should cities like Nashville, Memphis, and other large cities begin to lobby states to contribute to the voucher program? I know right now you're limited of what you get from HUD, but should we now begin to ask the state to make contributions?
I'm going to pause here and let Norman answer. Dan, I think he was jumping in to answer the previous question.
Yeah, THDA administers the voucher program in the smaller counties, so they get their own. I'm not sure how we would go about getting additional funding from THDA to support our voucher program. There are restrictions to using outside sources to support your voucher program. But that's something that, the committee could pursue, but that would be really a THDA question.
And then Norman, I think you had something to add to Mick's question about the growth in vouchers over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say it all pretty much has been housing conversion actions and VASH vouchers, and then other special purpose vouchers like mainstream, non-elderly disabled vouchers. As far as an open application for additional housing choice vouchers, you haven't seen those. It's always been special purpose or housing conversion actions.
And this is beyond the realm of this committee. I mean, this committee is focused on what we can do, but I will say that the key planks of the Biden-Harris Affordable Housing Plan, which I assume are still available, really talked about some regulatory changes, some things that they've already taken some steps on, but also significantly expanding the Section 8 voucher program. I think there's some discussion. We would be hopeful that as a part of a larger infrastructure plan, there may be additional dollars for funding for construction of new affordable housing, but the Biden-Harris plan really emphasizes expansion of Section 8.
Good deal. Thank you, Matt. I can see there are a couple of hands up, and I'd like to open the mic to John Dean and then Kay Bowers.
Appreciate the commentary on the trend we're seeing on the federal side. The other partner in this is the private landlords. How much of a capacity constraint is it finding landlords willing to do Section 8 housing?
Over four or 5 years, it's really been tough for us in the national market. Rents skyrocketed. It's due to program limitations. We couldn't compete with the market for a few years there, hardly. We have seen a decline in landlord participation over the last few years. I see somewhat of it coming back now. I'm hearing from landlords that we haven't heard before over the last few months as being interested, but we're always open to adding landlords to the program. I'm on a couple of committees for landlord outreach for the Veterans Administration and also the Homeless Impact Division. We're working with them as a group to promote the program and recruit new landlords as well. So it has been an issue for us.
Kay, did you want to ask your question? And then after Kay, Edubina Arce, and then after Edubina, we have Lethea Mann.
Yeah, I have a request of Greg. From his slides, I'd like to see a separate slide for project-based vouchers and tenant-based or housing choice vouchers. I'd like to know from Norman this data point. Out of the voucher capacity, what % is used on some sort of monthly, quarterly basis? I think that's an important data point also. And then the last request is in terms of equity, I'd like to know, I'd like for us to be able to map the best that we can where those housing choice vouchers are being used and where the project-based vouchers are. So we have a map of Davidson County that shows that data because when we're talking about neighborhoods and equity, that's an important piece. And also income segregation, which we're trying to get away from.
Good deal. We've got those listed. I know, Kay, you'll keep us on track for those requests, and we will be sure we get those in circulation over the next week. I'd like to now move to Edubina Arce's question and then Lethea Mann.
Thank you very much. What are the incentives for landlords to rent to Section 8?
It's guaranteed rent. You know, our assistance is direct deposit each month on the first working day of each month. So it's, you know, at least some portion of the rent is guaranteed every month. We do periodic inspections. Some landlords see that as a benefit, others do not. But many do see that as a benefit to help them keep track of the condition of their unit. We have a landlord portal that a landlord can go in and see every inspection on their units, payment history. There's forms on that portal that they can, that they use, and provides, each tenant's caseworker. So a lot of our landlords are using that portal to keep track of their units. We've tried to streamline processes as far as inspection and, payment processing. We process not only on the first of every month, but we have a mid-month check run so that they're not waiting a whole another month to get a payment that might not have got in on the previous month. So we would like to, a few years ago, Metro funded a landlord incentive program for our homeless veterans that provided a $1,000 leasing bonus to the landlord. Also provided a funding for any damages or unpaid rent when the veteran moved out. But that program was eliminated last year, and we are looking at other ways to incentivize the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good deal. Lethea.
Hello again. It's the question I asked before. Kay's question may touch on it, but data on how the Section 8 homeownership program is working. How many vouchers are used towards homeownership?
Yeah, at the present time, we only have 5 or 6, I think. Since 2008, we have not expanded our homeownership program. Primarily the median price home in Nashville is difficult for our participants to qualify for with their limited income, even with our voucher assistance. We do still promote homeownership through our family self-sufficiency program and our partners with places like Habitat for Humanity and THDA. So we still have a few participants receiving the homeownership voucher assistance. But again, over the last several years, we've promoted our homeownership through the family self-sufficiency program, and we'll have 5 to 6 or 7 participants every year buy a home through the family self-sufficiency program.
Good deal. I noticed that Angie Hubbard has her hand up. Angie, did you have a question?
Our in a collaboration with MDHA with Norman, and it's a follow-up on keys. But I would like to see how many vouchers, and not necessarily mapped, but maybe a list, are porting outside of Davidson County, because we know, I think Greg showed how many are unused, but then we also have and it's a good will take Section 8 rent, or Section 8 housing vouchers. I think
good deal. So our list of data is growing. It is now 1:27. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Certainly Angie and Kay are on deck, Kay especially to receive any additional requests for data. I encourage you to route it through Kay so that we can be sure that we focus on, I'm sure there are several overlapping interests in this committee. So we want to get to those big issues. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I am going to turn the mic back to Mick. We do have some, evolving plans for the next few committee meetings. I did want to just reassure everyone we're meeting with your committee chairs and the Creations Committee chairs next week so that we can organize our work. But we might have some schedule changes, and I just encourage everybody to give us a little grace as we try to make this work in our time frame and in the virtual environment. So thanks everybody, and I'm going to turn this back to Mick.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dia, and thanks everybody. We heard a lot today. A lot of it was actually focusing more on the creation side. So I just wanted to flag that as well as we're thinking about this and thinking about it. And one key thing that Joe and Matt touched on that I think was really helpful and important is as we're talking about the pilot program that comes up a lot, it is mostly going to be most helpful on the creation of new units. That's where we get the most leverage out of it. So as it stands right now, unless there's a way we can sort of figure out a way, and probably involve state law, to change it, that's probably something that's more for the 5 o'clock group than it is for our group, unless we start to think creatively about it for right now. So I just wanted to try and put a little bit of a bow on how all these things are connected. And I'll just throw out my 2 cents here. I think thinking about 500 new units a year based on Greg's data feels right to me. I talked to a lot of developers that are involved with some of these units. That seems like the right amount if things stay the same. So that feels really good, Greg, and that was a really great way to put all the data together. So I just wanted to touch on that, but also remind us all that, and also circle back to, we're going to be focusing on preservation. We'll continue to work on that particular question as the weeks go on. But thank you to everyone, all our presenters, Jeremy, Ashley, Greg, Norman, Matt, Joe. Hope I got everyone. But thanks everyone, and can't wait to see you next week.
Bye all.
Okay.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye.
Thanks all.